Today we're going to learn about the giant tortoises of Galapagos. They are the unique creatures that people come to see here. The tortoises arrived millions of years ago by crossing from the mainland about 600 miles on floating rafts of vegetation or just floating. The journey would have taken 1 to 2 months minimum, and that's without food or fresh water. So they have a good ability to stand long periods without food or water. During the 1800s, there was one record that suggested that one of them could live up to 20 months without food or water. So that's a pretty amazing feat. They're able to live to about 200 years old, which is also quite a record for animals of that size. In order to colonize the islands, there had to be at least one pregnant female arriving, or two, a male and a female tortoises. They could have been small tortoises, we don't know, but one way or another they arrived. And upon arrival, they had to work out how to live in a very different environment from the one they left behind. Luckily, tortoises are pretty adaptable, and finding vegetation, any vegetation, is easy enough for them, because they're able to eat about 93% of the vegetation we have here in Galapagos. So they're not choosy, they're not selective, just anything green really. And that they would have found. It might have been hard, but being able to live so long without food or water, they weren't in any great hurry. So the conditions for adapting to the islands were perfect.
Before we continue with today's video, if you're thinking about visiting the Galapagos Islands, then you're in the right place. I'm Paul McFarling, and I've been guiding here since 1992. Over the years, I've worked with many of the leading cruise and tour operators in the Galapagos, helping visitors experience these incredible islands and unique wildlife. Today, I organise unforgettable Galapagos adventures for visitors of all ages, with a particular specialism in student, alumni and educational group tours. Whether you're planning a private trip, a family holiday or a group expedition, I'd love to help you get the most from your Galapagos experience. Check out the link below and get in touch today to start planning your Galapagos adventure.
So when they found themselves isolated, some ended up on islands which were very low down, no greenery in terms of shrubs on the floor, whereas tortoises that found themselves in the areas which were high up had highlands, humid highlands with greenery, which they could feed off the floor quite easily, not needing to reach up. The highlands would have been cooler, the lowlands hotter. So they've adapted, and that's shown in the shape of their bodies today. So the other changes, other minor differences, just being isolated on their own, have led to variations in the shells. But the most striking difference is between the saddleback and the dome-shaped tortoises. They're big tortoises shaped like a war helmet, and they're able to just feed on the ground, come out in hide away in pretty good shade created by bushes and trees up there, and they're able to bathe in pools. So they have got quite big. They're the biggest of the tortoises. The saddleback tortoises are the ones found in the lowlands. They have to reach up quite high to get their food, and in doing so, the tortoise that can reach the highest is able to eat as much food as it can, and then be more successful in breeding because it's stronger, and therefore have more offspring. So there's a selection process going on where the tortoises are able to reach higher and higher. And the way they're able to reach higher is by deformities in the front of their shell that allow the neck to go up high. So if it goes up high, the shell, they're able to raise their head up higher. And the generation after generation has allowed for higher and higher tortoises and today we've got some that can reach up to about 5.5 feet high. So it's pretty amazing. They are in a hotter environment, so they can't get too big because they wouldn't be able to dissipate heat, and they just overcook. So they're limited by the size they can get in terms of their bulk and their volume, but are more sort of stringy in terms of long necks, long legs, and much more open. So this helps them cool as well, and all part of the package. So other variants, there is flat ones, but it's pretty amazing to see how evolution has pushed these tortoises, which are now isolated, not only from island to island, but even on the same island, like Isabella, has many different subpopulations divided by a lava flow, a forest, or just by simply being in very different altitudes. So we can see the beauty of the evolution going on here in the tortoises. They have to control their temperature of their body with their environment, not with their internal metabolism. So they are very tuned, whether they're in the sun or in the shade. They can control their temperature in all different ways, either moving into the sun, moving into the shade, going into water, and taking siestas, not moving around too much when it's hot. They also migrate with the weather, so like a lot of animals, they go up into the highlands when it's dry down in the lowlands and cold. They don't mind the cool weather, but in the highlands they feed on the vegetation, they go into the pools, they drink a lot of water. So when the rains come, they head straight back down to the lowlands, where they eat as much as they can, much more nutritious food, including basically the new growth leaves, which have very little fibre in it and are easy to digest. They're not good at digesting fibre, so they eat a lot when they're in the lowlands in the rainy season, and they also breed and lay eggs. So the mating occurs and the egg laying occurs down there. The temperature has to be around about 29 degrees so that the ones that are above that become females and the ones below become males. You get a good balance. So they seem to know where the right places are to breed, to nest.
The conservation of the tortoises has been a subject quite high on the agenda ever since the formation of the national park in around 1960. The first thing that was done was to assess the damage done by the predation of the past by humans. During the whalers' times and previous sailors and settlers, there was nothing to protect the tortoises, and many were eaten. They were taken from low-lying islands, the smaller ones first, then the bigger ones, but thousands were taken off, and the impact was different on different islands. In some cases, they were all taken, like on the island of Floriana. In others, like in Hispaniola, only 14 were left, 2 males, 12 females. On Pinta Island, there was just the one tortoise left, Lonesome George, as he became known, as the conservation efforts tried to look for a mate for him for many years. And on Fernandina, they were all burnt by a big volcanic eruption that happened in the mid-1800s. So it was been very hard to try to assess the damage done by natural causes in the case of the eruption, and then also done by the presence of humans. So by protecting them from the 1960s onwards, with the formation of the national park, giant tortoises were no longer able to be hunted legally, and they were left alone, largely unprotected. However, future problems involved animals that had been left by the humans. Once they'd looked at the different numbers of tortoises, they saw that certain populations were an imminent threat. Other populations had already gone extinct, and others were savable, but conservation efforts had to be done. For example, on the island of Pinzón, there was a big healthy population of giant tortoises, but they were mostly above the age of about 50. Upon careful inspection, they saw that every single last tortoise hatchling was being devoured by rats that were rampant on the island. Rats are able to go up to a baby tortoise and gnaw through the top of the shell to get to the meat inside. So the reflex of pulling their arms and legs in and their head doesn't work in the presence of rats. So the conservationists had to bring the newly laid eggs of the giant tortoises of that island into captive breeding programs, which they conducted in Santa Cruz in the newly formed national park headquarters. And they bred these tortoises to the age of about 2, and then after about 5 years old, the tortoises were put back. After 2 years old, the tortoises become rat-proof. The carapace is strong enough to avoid being eaten by rats. And then after the age of 5, they've got a much better chance of survival in the wild. This took place since the 60s, constantly, to keep the island, the population of Pinzón tortoises, going. On other islands, there were other problems like goats and pigs. Pigs would bite through the tortoises when they're very small. Pigs, though, were able to be eliminated quite quickly, where they were quite easily hunted. Goats, on the other hand, would compete with the giant tortoises for food, so they would eat all the green quite quickly, meaning that there was no food left for the giant tortoises. And they would also breed incredibly fast. So although they were culled every year, it wasn't enough to keep the population got down and the greenery up. Eventually in 2001, conservationists embarked on a huge program where all of the goats were eliminated from most of the islands, rendering them no longer a threat, and the vegetation grew back and the tortoises were able to carry on their life. So a lot of conservation has occurred, and even rat populations today are being brought down to a minimum. Tortoise populations have been brought back from the brink of extinction. Others have been, their DNA has been discovered in other populations. So it is a really exciting story of preservation of all these different subspecies and subpopulations.